Is Samael an angel or a demon? Is he good or is he bad? Does he work for God or is he God's greatest adversary? All of these questions and more are somewhat unknowable. He is the greatest mystery ever. Is he the snake of Eden or is he the key to freedom? And I believe it depends who you are. Depending on who you are, he will be your enemy or your savior. Depending on what you've done, he will either free you or he can break you. I met Samael around, I'm not quite sure, unfortunately. My memory with my dissociative amnesia is not the best. It was either 2022 or it was 2023. I met Azrael, a different face and form of death as an angel, when I believe it was the summer of, this is the problem with living with dissociative amnesia. I can't keep track of anything. I'm sorry. I believe around 22 is when I met Azrael, and it was in a dream to start with. I first met Azrael in a dream, and that dream of them changed my life. Like, it literally changed my life. Because in that dream, which was the first time I met death itself, like faced death, I first faced death as Azrael and in Azrael in that dream. And in the dream I had, I felt like everything else up until that point, all the confusion and the frustration and the pain, everything else didn't matter. And in the moment of that dream, seeing this giant planet-sized kaleidoscopic mass of eyes and wings and tongues and shapes, I just felt like as long as I'm with him, I'll be okay. I felt like as long as I follow him, as long as I follow this and this feeling, I will be okay. And I feel like that dream was the first time I ever truly felt seen or felt truly safe. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was a dream that I had where I felt like had I been any other man having that dream, I would have been fucking terrified. But being who I am, I just felt this immense, immeasurable relief. And that was the first time I met death. Later, I came to know death, and I actually feel that Azrael introduced me to this form, this face of death. Later, I met death as Samael, and I first had a dream of him as well. And I will also say it wasn't just dreams. They were also, after I had these dreams, these beings started to affect me in my daily life in ways that I noticed that had a drastic impact on my day-to-day life. But the first time I met Samael was also in a dream, and there was this blue angel who looked like an old man who was caught in a rainbow storm, almost like a rainbow cyclone, or like this all-consuming rainbow storm. And in the center of the storm was a blue angel, and it was Samael. And there are reasons I started working with death under the name of Samael as opposed to how I was formerly working with death as Azrael. But for me, Samael is not my enemy. Samael is not my enemy. And he has profoundly helped me in my life. He's taught me a lot of the sorcery that I use in my day-to-day life. And I do believe that he is a form of Satan. And I do believe he is the highest Satan and the angel of Mars, which makes him an angel embodiment of the planet Mars. So this is coming from what it says about Samael in the Zohar, and I am not Jewish. I'm a sorcerer and a theistic Satanist. However, coming from an ex-Christian and ex-atheist background, I find anything I can that involves Samael useful to learn from. I don't agree with I don't agree with any of the monotheistic faiths, but I do think there's pieces in them that I do agree with. There's pieces in any religion that I can learn from. And I do believe in Samael, and I do believe that he is someone who, depending on he will either be your greatest foe or your greatest salvation. And he can be a force that can break your mind, but he can also be a force that frees you and teaches you how to protect yourself and empower yourself and to rise above the hardships of this earthly existence. And for me, I had been being tortured for years. I had been being tortured by humans, by the man who raised me, who was my father. I had been being tortured by this man for 22 years. And then he disowned me through a text, and he lied to all my family, and he tried to paint himself as the victim of the abuse he put me through. And then, about a year after I was disowned, I was diagnosed with PTSD and DID, dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder, which was in direct response to the 22 years of abuse that I lived through. I have PTSD and I have DID because for the first 22 years of my life, I lived as another man's slave, his pet, an object of his amusement. I lived as his puppet. I was not ever really allowed to be a child. I didn't really have a childhood or a teenage years, how I see it. I had servitude. I had obedience. I had abuse disguised as love. I had tolerance disguised as love. I had someone who chose to have a child, who neglected the basic needs of their oldest child, who tortured me for 22 years and then disowned me through a text on Google Hangouts. That was my upbringing. That was the first 22 years of my life. I did not know happiness, not true, real, genuine happiness or safety. I had never had it, so I could perform it, and I performed it convincingly. I could play a part that made people think I was happy, but I was not happy, and I hated my life, and I hated myself, and I just wanted to die. And I self-harmed. I self-harmed for a really long time. A lot of it was like dissociated and blocked from my memory, but it came back as I came in contact with my different personalities and alters and headmates. And I remembered the things that I felt there was no other way to survive but to just dissociate. And I remember being 7 years old, knowing that who I am would never be accepted or loved by my dad, and feeling like the only hope I had to survive was to learn to be quote-unquote normal. It was around 21, after being diagnosed with autism around 20, it was around 21 that I accepted I'm not capable of being normal, that my normal is not society's normal, and that with my disabilities and queer identities, I will never be normal. That is that the baseline that was set out for me is something I can't do. I'm not able to do that, and I had to accept that. I was forced to accept that I cannot maintain employment. I was forced to accept that I cannot live the life that was preordained or predestined for me by my dad. I was never meant to live as a woman. I was never meant to live as a straight person. I was never meant to live as a non-disabled person. I am a man. I'm a gender fluid trans man, which means I fluctuate between being a man to being non-binary. And I am autistic and I'm queer. I like other men, and I also like non-binary and trans people and women. I love who I love. I am who I am, and I can't change these things about me. And I spent the first 22 years of my life feeling like there was nothing I could possibly do to find happiness, feeling like I just had to be obedient and listen to everyone around me. And I feel like I wasted the first 22 years of my life on a lie, because I didn't know there was an alternative. I didn't know safety was even possible for me. And when I met Azrael, it was just before I was disowned, because the summer before I was disowned, so this may have been 2021, late into 2021, before the fall of 2022, but I was disowned, I know, September 16th, 2022, and I'd met Azrael before then, and they had been watching over me and helping me. And it was Azrael who helped me before and after I was disowned. And then it was Samael who took me the rest of the way. People are confused why I'm a theistic Satanist. Like, how can you believe in angels and demons but not God? How can you very firmly believe in demons and angels and jinn and the other things that I believe in and not believe in God? But the thing is, and I've really thought about this, it really depends on what you mean by God. Because the God I was taught to believe in when I was Christian is not God. What I was taught to believe in as a child doesn't exist. So that isn't God, or God doesn't exist by extension. When I was an atheist, because I was an atheist until 20, which is a really long time. I was an atheist for like 10 years. I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe in any sort of spirits. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in any gods. I didn't believe in any spirits. At 20, after being diagnosed with autism, around 20 is when I summoned my first spirit, and I summoned a Jinni. And I summoned a Jinni warrior under the command of King Alamar, the Jinn King of Mars, the red one, the red devil. And it's really funny because I actually went to a community college where the mascot was the Red Devils. And I feel like I don't know, someone commented something to do with that college a while ago, maybe years ago, on my YouTube, and they're like, oh, I found out about you from Painting Winter. And at the time, I'm like, I don't remember what that is. I'm sorry, because my dissociative amnesia is really freaking bad. And now I'm like, oh, I think that's something I did in college. I think they probably knew me from that. And I was like, I'm sorry, with my memory, it's really hard to keep track of things. I can't. It comes and it goes. But Samael, to me, he started out earlier on in our relationship as a tester, as a teacher, a guide, and a tester. And I will say it was brutal. It was really fucking painful at first, for a while, for like a year and a half, because the parts of me that came through in Samael were my PTSD, were my CPTSD, my depression, was all this stuff from 22 years that I was burying, had to slowly resurface, and I had to face it and deal it. And he showed me how to do that, but because of the form of death that he embodies and the form of Satan that he embodies, it was agonizingly painful. But it was worth it. In my case, it was worth it. It was worth that pain because it was shadow work, which is both a psychological but also spiritual practice. Shadow work is the process of facing your own shadow, your own inner darkness, and integrating it over time. I do not believe it is possible by what the shadow is to ever fully integrate it, short of death, but I do think that it's all the suppressed pieces of yourself, and that includes the good and the bad. And so, New Year's of 2023, I declared myself a wizard and a theistic Satanist. Under the guidance of Azrael, I then was introduced to Samael and other demons and Satans who are closely connected to Samael. I went on a version or variation of the left-hand path from a Western occult perspective, and I faced the pieces of myself, or the klipos of myself, the shadows of myself and my own mind that I needed to face. In the case of my being a DID system, this involved meeting a lot of my alters, my alternate personalities, we see ourselves kind of as demons or daemons. I met the parts of myself who were hurting, who were stuck in their trauma, and I had to one by one help to free these parts of myself so that we could start to live a functional life together. And in this, at the end of the left-hand path, we achieved functional plurality as opposed to dysfunctional plurality, meaning as a DID system now, me and my headmates are able to live a functional life together, and I achieved a sort of integration between the harshest personality of me and the lightest personality of me, or the harshest personality of me formerly, and the most innocent. It's difficult to explain, but there's a different, these two polar opposite extreme personalities or alters in my system integrated with me, forming different personalities. But when this happened, it essentially symbolized my ascension of the left-hand path, but it also symbolized achieving functional plurality rather than going back to hypothetical singlethood, singular consciousness. So most people have one sense of self that develops pre-puberty, and then even though people do have different parts of themselves, they don't have dissociative amnesia separating the roles that they fill in their life. Whereas someone with multiple personalities, or DID, dissociative identity disorder, will have dissociative amnesic barriers separating the different roles that they take on in their life. And these different roles take on different personalities to become fully fledged people. And some people's goal would be to try and become one person again. Some people, like myself, that's not the goal. That's never been the goal. My goal is to be safe. My goal is to be happy. My goal is to be able to live a life where I'm not constantly having PTSD flashbacks, living in my pain. And Samael taught me how to do that. And he is everything to me. Samael is God to me. But I disagree with the Sethians and their interpretation, or the Sethian Gnostics. I don't agree with what they've said on that, because they say that Samael created the universe and that he's this evil demiurge and that everything bad is his fault because he created the universe with the stolen knowledge of Sophia and the Pleroma. I don't believe in any of that shit. I don't think that Samael is like that. I don't see that in him. I don't think he's this bastard they've made him. I don't agree with anything that makes Satan out to be a scapegoat and only a scapegoat. Yes, he is a scapegoat, but the entire point of the scapegoat is that it carries everyone else's sins, that it's blamed through no fault of its own, and is a sacrifice for everyone else's sins. Samael is the sacrifice. Samael is the angel and demon and God who suffers for us, for humans, who chose to love humans and to help humans and teach us sorcery and valuable life skills. That's what the Watchers did. The Watchers were not these evil people that just, they started having giant children with humans and they came to Earth and they defiled themselves by sleeping with human women. No, fuck that. Fuck Enoch. Like, I love Enoch, I love the mythology, but also fuck that. Like, no, that's not how it is. These beings chose to love us. And in response to that, you've made them your demons and your Satans, and you've scapegoated them, and these old gods, these ancient gods, who really existed outside of these angels, but they were personified through these pantheistic and polytheistic deities that got turned into these angels, that got turned into these demons. Well, those demons are the old gods. And those demons, these fallen angels, love us. Well, it depends who you are. If you're someone who's like attacking people and not in contact with your own daemons and not in contact with your own shadow and is just like projecting everything outwards all the time, then yeah, unfortunately that's a lot of people, and yeah, the demons won't like you if you're doing that, and Samael won't like you if you're doing that. But if you're someone who's genuinely honest and authentic in your life, who's really seriously trying, but once you put in the work to really take accountability and to heal yourself, that is when, if you are a healed being, Samael becomes your friend and becomes not even just his wizard's friends, but I would say, and I've met at least a few other people where this applies, he can even become lovers of sorcerers. He is a lover of mine, and I love him, and he is the ending, and he is freedom.